About 4 years ago, I put a photovoltaic system on our roof and had to cut down some trees and decided to, instead of having these trees hauled off to the dump someplace, decided to have the trees cut into lumber. And the company that I hired basically stickered this lumber in really neat piles in the backyard. And I ended up with some beautiful oak and pine, a lot of quarter sawn oak, and it's been air drying now for about 4 years. So I decided to go ahead for this project and use some of that wood. So my sons, who are up from Puerto Rico, went back there and pulled off some 8-inch wide and some 6-inch wide lengths of oak and a couple of strips of pine also. And then we started to cut these down to the length that followed what John Peters had recommended. So we're basically trying to copy his plan for these raised beds. So they were 57 inches long, about 36 inches wide. And when you put the two 8-inch and 6-inch boards together, you end up with a 14-inch depth roughly for the raised bed. So in this video, you could just see where I'm cutting some of these to length. And we didn't bother to plane this wood. We didn't sand it. We didn't do anything. We just took it right off the pile and started cutting the sides of the box. Here you can see some battens that we're cutting to hold the two pieces together to form the sides. These were just some old bed slats that I was given by my daughter-in-law. And here you can see where we're putting the two boards together using the battens. This is one of my sons here who's using a pneumatic nailer just to kind of position the battens and tack them down. And then following this, they went back and used a drill to pre-drill some holes that they then used to insert screws. And we just used Robinson deck screws, so it's got a square drive. It makes it real easy to drive the screws in. You don't have to worry too much about stripping the heads. We use stainless steel screws in some of the locations, but most of them were just regular deck screws that have some protection. This whole process from start to end took about, I would say, 3 hours, maybe tops, to make the two boxes. And that's with the two sons of mine here working together and me pitching in every once in a while, but usually just kind of sitting back and giving directions. Didn't take too much to keep these guys going. Just some sliced pineapple and some hummus, and they were good to go. We did buy some pressure treated 2x4s to make the legs, and this was a deviation from the design that John Peters had. John used 4x4s for the legs. I haven't really seen good quality here with 4x4s in terms of the pressure treatment now that they're using the new process that they are for pressure treating lumber. It doesn't seem to get down in the core like it used to, and the 4x4s don't seem to hold up as well. So there's been a typical method down here of taking two 2x4s and basically screwing them together. And here we're making the legs, and we use these 3-inch deck screws to screw the pieces together. And my son is using one of these little wizard grinders here to kind of grind the tips of the screws off that kind of penetrated on the back side. That would be facing toward the inside of the box, so it really wouldn't be in a position where it could hurt anybody. But just to first be on the safe side, we did cut the tips of those screws off. Here the boys are mounting the hardware cloth on the bottom of the box. This was 1/2-inch hardware cloth, and we got a 3-foot wide, 10-foot roll, which gave us enough to do the two boxes. We're using crown staples here and a pneumatic stapler. My son had to experiment a little bit with it to get it so that he could get these crown staples inserted with enough pressure to hold the wire in place, but not too much that it actually cut through the wire screen. We went all the way around the box with the staples, and as you'll see later, we took some 1x2 wood strips and framed this. That was one of the things that John Peters did after he stapled the screen on, was he framed it in. He did sort of suggest that it might be a good idea to provide some extra support on the bottom. He was going to kind of see how this held up. So just to be on the safe side, we went ahead and made some 2x4 cross pieces, installed those with some 3-inch deck screws to kind of add some extra support to the bottom of this wire, and then put the framing around it. I know one of the kits that John Peters bought and put together actually had wood slats for the bottom, and they were spaced apart with a little gap so that they could provide for some drainage. And that looks like a good idea, but I really thought that John Peters' original design with the hardware cloth was probably the best way to go. And we'll see. We'll see how long it lasts. Again, I used oak and pine for the sides of this box. It's 4/4 material, and it's probably going to last long enough. It's going to be above ground. It is going to have some dirt on the inside, and it is going to stay wet. Hopefully it won't rot away too quickly, and we'll get several seasons of growing out of this box. One thing that you're going to see in a minute, and we didn't get a good video of it, but cutting the hardware cloth with some snips is certainly a way to go. But we had this little wizard with a grinding wheel on it, a grinding disc, and so just for fun, we decided to see how well that would cut this hardware cloth, and boy, did that save some time. You can see Carson here with the little wizard in his hand. Unfortunately, you don't get to see the cutting, but it just zipped right down that hardware cloth. It was the slickest thing you've ever seen. So we use that procedure for both these. Here you can see him putting the legs on. The legs were 32 inches long with a 18-inch piece screwed onto it, and so the box ends up sitting off the ground. The bottom of the box sits off the ground about 18 inches. The top of the box is 32 inches off the ground. And that 18-inch piece of 2x4 forms that step that you can see there that the box sort of sits on. One thing that concerned me a little bit was that we had a lot of screws going into end grain, but I think the way it finally worked out, we had enough screws going into end grain and side grain that it should hold together pretty well. In this picture, you can see the 2x4 cross pieces that we put on to get a little extra support for that hardware cloth. As I mentioned earlier, this process went pretty quickly with these two guys working, and neither one of these boys had ever made a box like this. Basically, I was just kind of going from memory from watching John Peters' video a couple of times, but these guys really got the vision of how this thing was supposed to look and work, and so they were able to put two of these together very quickly. And they had a good time doing this. We took all the sound off of this video just so you wouldn't have to listen to the drills and saws, but there was a lot of laughing and conversation going on throughout the whole process. My two sons here get along very well. The son you see here is a director of sustainable nonprofit organization in Puerto Rico that teaches farming techniques and sustainable living techniques. And my other son is one of his project managers and basically runs several of the projects down there. They do a lot of workshops for college groups that come down. They also do a lot of work with local farmers, teaching them how to grow sustainable crops in the Puerto Rico area. The college students that come down not only learn about the agriculture, the techniques, but they also learn some other technologies. For instance, my one son is a certified rainwater collection designer, and so he's put together a rainwater collection system and teaches a workshop on how to set up a system like that. Here you can see that they're putting the little 1x2 strips around the edge of the hardware cloth to frame it in and provide a little extra anchor for the hardware cloth. They went around with a pneumatic nailer and nailed it down, but then followed that up with some stainless steel screws. So I don't think that frame is going to go anywhere anytime soon. And here's where I got to do some pneumatic nailing. One of the things that I hate working with this pneumatic system is, as you can see, is that tangle of pneumatic hose. That stuff is always getting in our way. And I just recently purchased this pneumatic hose that is supposed to not have any kind of memory, so that when you uncoil it, it'll lay flat on the ground and it won't coil up. I haven't had a chance to try it out yet, but I'm kind of interested to see how that's going to work out. I do a lot of pneumatic nailing, some pin nailing with 23 gauge nailers. You saw the crown staples that we were using. We also do some brad nailing. The Adirondack chairs that you kind of see in the background, maybe that's what that green tarp is covering up in the background, is a project that a group of Boy Scouts are working on to make Adirondack chairs for a local charity here. And those were put together with pneumatic nailers to kind of get everything set in shape, and then they followed it up with some deck screws. And as you can see, that even though this thing is pretty substantial, my two sons were able to carry it. I won't say it's a thing of beauty, but it certainly is rustic looking and very functional. And that's my wife on the left there, who is going to be the farmer. She's the one that is going to be taking care of all these little plants. We're just getting this thing set up. It's probably a little bit late for a fall garden, but we're going to put in some winter crops and as a test drive with these boxes. We went ahead and put these on a deck in the backyard, and John Peters mentioned that one of the things he wants to do is put his on some kind of a deck so that he doesn't have to worry about the lawnmower and weed eaters working around it. And I've got the same problem here, so went ahead and put it on the deck. Here we're down at the local feed store getting together some of the materials that we need. We went to a local feed and seed store, and my two sons put together a recipe for some of the soil that we're going to use. So there's a certain percentage of organics that you need and materials for basically keeping the soil aerated and so it can hold water. So we used perlite, we had some peat moss, we had some potting soil, and we had this stuff called Coco Loco, which is a local blend of coconut fiber with worm castings and a lot of other goodies that put a really good mixture of nutrients and soil together. And here you see one of my sons stapling this architectural ground cloth on the inside of these boxes. This is the same material that people put in flower beds and stuff to keep weeds from growing up. So it lets water go through, but it keeps the soil retained in the box. And this was another thing that John Peters had used. So here we're mixing up the soil. I didn't mention it, but there was also some cow manure, some black cow manure that we added in this mix. One of my sons said that the peat moss really isn't a sustainable material because peat is evidently in peat bogs that are limited, whereas the coconut fiber is sustainable. I guess as fast as you can grow coconuts, you can get coconut fiber. And it turns out that the Coco Loco has the coconut fiber in it, but we also put some peat moss in this mixture. And there's my wife inspecting the beds. And we're putting a little water on the beds, kind of see how everything's going to hold together. So we wet the beds down pretty well. And tried to wash off the deck. All the shovelfuls that missed the box. This is some of the mulch that they got. It was just I guess it's a bag of hay that is left over from putting the hay in bales. And they actually sell bags of this, and it makes a good mulch. So we put some hay on the top of each of these to kind of cut down the evaporation rate. It also tends to protect the seedlings a little bit as they're getting started. And sometime this next week, we're going to go to a couple of the nurseries around town and see if we can find some seedlings to plant and pick up some seeds and see if we can get our little garden going. I know it takes a while to get proficient at this. I mean, I've heard from friends of mine that have gardens that it takes a good 2 years to get really good at um, having the right crops or the right plants and getting them put in at the right time and taking care of them and so on and so forth. So there they are. Uh, please subscribe and give us a thumbs up.